Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if TRI is a way to boost your brain power and who's most likely to try it? This new study dives deep into that very question. Imagine the future where we can actively improve our minds. Scientists are exploring all sorts of ways to do this, from special video games to brain stimulation and even smart drugs. But the big question is, who would actually use these methods and why? This research took a really close look at that. They did 2 studies with hundreds of people, asking them about their willingness to try these cognitive enhancers. They wanted to see if things like age, interest in science fiction, or even how smart someone thinks they are, play a role. They also dug into the reasons why people would want to enhance their minds, or why they'd rather not. The idea of making our brains better has been around for ages, showing up in books and movies. But now, it's not just science fiction anymore. With today's fast-paced world and the rise of AI, people are increasingly thinking about how to keep up, or even get ahead by boosting their own cognitive abilities. The researchers in this study wanted to understand this growing interest in cognitive enhancement, which they define as methods to improve things like attention, memory, and intelligence in healthy people, as opposed to treating diseases. There are basically 2 main categories of enhancement methods they looked at. First, active methods. These are the ones where you have to put in effort, like time and energy, to get a supposed boost. Think of working memory training, where you do specific exercises, or games designed to improve your brain function. Then there are passive methods. These are much easier, requiring less effort and time. Examples include taking a smart drug, or using non-invasive brain stimulation, where a weak electrical current is applied to your head. What they found pretty consistently across earlier studies, and this one is that people tend to like the active methods more than the passive ones. This makes sense. Active methods like brain training games feel more like they're earned. You're putting in the work, so the results feel more legitimate. Passive methods, on the other hand, like taking a pill or getting a brain zap, might feel less earned, and for some, a bit riskier or even unnatural. The researchers believe this higher acceptance of active methods might be linked to what is called meritocratic values, where people believe that hard work and effort should be rewarded. So how did they test all this? In their first study, they had over 200 people come into a lab. They filled out questionnaires about their acceptance of different cognitive enhancement methods, ranging from working memory training to genetic enhancement. They also measured participants' actual intelligence using tests and asked them to estimate their own intelligence. On top of that, they assess personality traits like the Big 5, personality strengths like narcissism and psychopathy, and even interests like science fiction hobbies. Looking at the numbers here, you can see the average acceptance scores for passive versus active enhancement methods. Passive methods like brain stimulation had a score around 3.11, while active methods like working memory training scored higher, around 4.8. Oh, this clearly shows that, on average, people were more willing to try the active methods. When they analyzed the data, they confirmed what they expected. People were much more willing to accept active enhancement methods than passive ones. The difference was pretty big too, with an effect size that's considered very large in psychology. This means it wasn't just a small difference, but a significant preference for methods that require more personal effort. Now, let's talk about who was more or less likely to accept these enhancements. They looked at a bunch of individual differences. One interesting finding was that having a higher interest in science fiction was linked to a higher acceptance of both passive and active enhancement. The researchers think this might be because science fiction often features these kinds of technologies, making people more familiar and open to them. Age also played a role, with younger people showing higher acceptance for active enhancement, which makes sense as they might be more willing to put in the effort. Interestingly, while intelligence and some personality traits showed small connections, they mostly didn't predict acceptance strongly in the end, especially when you looked at their combined effect. To make sure their findings were solid, they did a second study with nearly 200 more people. This study aimed to confirm the previous results and also get more in-depth qualitative data. They used similar measures for intelligence and acceptance, but also added new ones like trait anxiety and novelty seeking. The big new part here was qualitative analysis, where participants explained in their own words why they would or wouldn't use these methods. The results from Study 2 echoed many from Study 1. Again, people were more accepting of active enhancement. Science fiction hobbyism was a strong predictor of acceptance. They also found that self-estimated intelligence, meaning how smart people thought they were, was linked to accepting both types of enhancement. Psychometric intelligence, the actual measured intelligence, was linked to active enhancement. When they put all the factors together in complex analysis, Science fiction hobbyism consistently came out as a strong predictor for accepting both active and passive enhancement. This repeated finding really highlights how imagination and exposure to futuristic ideas can shape our views on enhancing ourselves. Age and actual intelligence were also important predictors for active enhancement, suggesting that younger, smarter individuals might be more drawn to the effortful, active methods. For passive methods, gender played a role, with men showing slightly higher acceptance. Now, for the really interesting part, why do people choose to enhance or not? They analyzed over 1,000 open-ended responses from participants. For accepting passive enhancement, the top reason was straightforward: wanting to improve their cognitive abilities. Coming in next was a general interest in enhancement itself, or transhumanism. For accepting active enhancement, the desire to improve cognitive abilities was even stronger, followed closely by how the method was applied, with participants finding active methods like games to be fun and easy ways to train their brains. When people accepted passive enhancement, they often mentioned wanting to improve their cognitive abilities, and a significant portion also cited an interest in the enhancement itself. They also talked about how they would use it, for example, to study better or for their careers. A key aspect for accepting passive methods was also the risk-benefit analysis, a perception of minimal costs and risks. On the flip side, why did people reject passive enhancement? Health concerns were the big one, with worries about side effects and safety being paramount. Ethical considerations also came up, with concerns about fairness and access. Many felt that the effort involved or the lack of long-term impact made it not worth it. It's interesting that the same factors, like health and safety, were also prerequisites for acceptance, but became reasons for rejection when they weren't met. For accepting active enhancement, the desire to improve cognitive abilities was again number one. But what really stood out was the application itself. People found active methods, especially game-based ones, to be fun and easy. They liked that they could control the training and that it seemed harmless. An important factor was also the perceived authenticity, feeling like the improvement was due to their own work. When it came to rejecting active enhancement, effort was the biggest reason. People found these methods too time-consuming and simply too much work. Safety concerns and a feeling that enhancement was unnecessary were also common. Unlike passive enhancement, where people mentioned conditions under which they would reconsider, those rejecting active enhancement generally didn't offer much room for changing their minds unless it was for therapeutic purposes. So, what does this all mean? The studies strongly confirm that people prefer active cognitive enhancement over passive methods. This preference seems rooted in values like meritocracy, believing that effort should lead to reward, while individual traits like intelligence and personality were examined. They didn't explain a large part of the acceptance of enhancement. Instead, interests, especially a passion for science fiction, emerged as a consistent predictor. This suggests that exposure to fictional portrayals of enhanced futures might make people more open to the idea of improving their own minds. The qualitative findings really highlighted the difference these methods make. For example, the application of active methods was seen as fun and easy, making them more appealing, whereas passive methods more often brought up concerns about health, safety, and effort as prerequisites for acceptance. The motives for rejection also differed. Health and safety concerns were much more prominent for passive methods, while the sheer effort involved was the main deterrent for active ones. This research suggests that while we might think of intelligence or personality as the main drivers of our choices, in the case of cognitive enhancement, it's more about how we perceive the method itself, the effort it requires, and its perceived safety and benefits. The desire to improve our cognitive abilities is a powerful motive. But how we go about achieving it, and the potential trade-offs involved, are what really shape our decisions. The researchers conclude that stable traits like intelligence and personality have a limited power in explaining why people accept cognitive enhancement. Instead, contextual and situational factors seem to play a bigger role. Things like how well an individual's skills match the demands of their environment, their job, and even social norms might be more important than personality. Future research could explore these person-environment fits more closely. They also suggest developing better questionnaires based on these findings to understand the specific motives for enhancement more deeply. It seems that for now, our imagination and our attitude towards effort and risk are bigger influencers than our inherent traits. What I find really fascinating here is the contrast between our desire for improvement and our practical concerns. We all want to be better, smarter, more productive, but we're also very aware of the risks. The study shows that the story we tell ourselves about a method, whether it is about effortful growth or an easy shortcut, heavily influences our willingness to try it. And the science fiction connection is a brilliant reminder of how our media consumption shapes our views on future possibilities. For future research, I'd love to see studies that actually let people try these methods in controlled environments and then ask them about their motives in real time. Also, exploring the impact of societal pressures and how the rich get richer or level the playing field arguments play out in real life would be incredibly valuable. This study is a big step in understanding our complex relationship with self-improvement technologies. What are your thoughts on cognitive enhancement? Would you try an active method like brain training games more readily than a passive one like a smart drug? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations into the amazing world of psychology. See you next time.